The cold millionaire saved me from my ex, but he demanded something I could never give. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The parking lot behind the Blue Lantern bar was almost empty. A pale streetlight flickered over the cracked asphalt, painting long shadows across the cars. The air was sharp and cold enough to sting the lungs. Grace Miller pulled her jacket tighter, a thin fabric that barely kept the wind out. Her shift had just ended, and the tips in her pocket would hardly cover rent. She was halfway to her beat-up sedan when a familiar voice froze her in place. Grace. Tyler. He leaned against her car, the same easy smile that once melted her heart now twisted with something darker. His breath smelled of whiskey. "I just wanted to talk," he said, stepping closer. "You keep ignoring my calls." Grace kept her eyes on her keys. "Because there is nothing left to say." He laughed softly, but his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "You think you can walk away from me, after everything I did for you?" She tried to pull free. "Let me go." Tyler's voice dropped lower. "You owe me, Grace. You owe me everything." Her pulse spiked. The parking lot was silent, except for the wind and the low hum of a passing truck. Then a pair of headlights swept across them, stopping only a few yards away. A black SUV. The engine idled. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a dark coat that caught the light like glass. His expression was unreadable calm, but his eyes were the kind that measured everything in seconds. "Take your hands off her," he said. His voice was quiet, yet it carried the weight of command. Tyler straightened, puffing up. "And who the hell are you?" The man did not answer. He simply gave a small nod. From the shadows, two other figures appeared, security, unmistakable. Tyler hesitated, then released her wrist. His bravado drained into muttered curses as he backed away. Grace stood there trembling, too shocked to speak. The stranger shrugged off his coat and placed it over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled faintly of cedar and rain. "You should go home," he said evenly. "Or to the police." "I do not need help," she managed. "I can handle him." The man looked at her bruised wrist, then back at her face. "Freedom is not pretending you do not need help." He handed her a small black card, no logo, no title, only a name printed in silver. Cole Harrington. Beneath it, a single phone number and the words "call when ready." Before she could reply, he turned, stepped back into the SUV, and disappeared into the night. For a long time, Grace stood there, the card cold in her hand, her heart still racing. The wind bit through her thin shirt, but the coat around her shoulders held the warmth he left behind. She looked down at the name again, frowning. "Cole Harrington," she whispered. Who even was that? Grace walked toward the nearest trash bin and dropped the card in. But halfway to her car, something pulled her back. She dug through the bin, found the card again, wiped the dust off, and folded it carefully into the worn notebook she always carried. Under the streetlight, the snow began to fall thin, hesitant flakes swirling around her. She pulled the coat tighter, unaware that the name stitched inside the collar would soon change everything she thought she knew about trust, power, and rescue. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the thin curtains of Grace's small apartment. The space was silent, except for the faint hum of traffic below, and the steady tick of a cheap wall clock. Her hands were still cold, even with a mug of coffee between them. The coat the stranger had given her hung over the back of a chair, looking far too expensive for this worn-out room. Grace lived on the third floor of an old brick building where the paint peeled off in thin curls. Rent was due in 3 days, and her phone kept buzzing with messages from her landlord. She ignored them and opened her laptop. The screen showed her checking account balance $53.18. She tried to breathe. She had been in worse places, she told herself. But deep down, she knew that was a lie. Every problem seemed to trace back to Tyler. A year ago, she had believed him when he promised stability, when he said he would take care of her while she finished her degree in interior design. What she got instead was a man who needed control more than love. He opened credit cards in her name, drained her savings, and left a trail of unpaid hospital bills from her mother's treatments. When her mother passed away, Tyler did not even show up at the funeral. He only called afterward to ask for the keys to her car. Grace pressed her palms over her face. The bruises on her wrist were faint now, but they throbbed when she thought about him. She reached for her notebook on the table, a small, worn thing covered in doodles and reminders. Inside, she had written her own rules of survival. Page 1 read, "Do not borrow money from a man. Do not get in his car. Do not tell him your secrets." This morning, she added a fourth line with a shaky pen. 4. Do not let anyone rescue you twice. She closed the notebook, her handwriting pressing deep into the paper. When she turned her head, her eyes landed on the coat again. It looked almost out of place in this room of cracked walls and second-hand furniture. She touched the sleeve gently. The fabric was soft, heavier than anything she had ever owned. For a moment she wondered what kind of man could afford to hand over a coat like that without thinking twice. She pulled it closer, searching for a tag so she could return it properly. Her fingers brushed over the lining, and there, stitched neatly inside the collar, she saw the name. C. Harrington. She blinked. "Harrington," she whispered. "No way. That has to be a coincidence." She had heard the name before, somewhere in the background of local news or business headlines. Harrington Global. A corporation too big for someone like her to ever touch. The man last night, could he really be that Cole Harrington? The thought felt ridiculous. Men like him did not drive through parking lots at midnight to stop drunk ex-boyfriends. Still, the name shimmered in her mind like something out of reach. Grace folded the coat neatly and placed it on her bed. She told herself she would find a dry cleaner, have it washed, and return it to the company office. It was not a debt, she thought, just a matter of decency. She changed into her restaurant uniform, a plain black shirt and faded jeans, then tied her hair back. The clock read 9:45. She had 30 minutes to get to the new place that had finally hired her after weeks of rejection emails. When she stepped outside, the wind hit hard, carrying the smell of car exhaust and fresh bagels from the cafe downstairs. She wrapped her arms around herself as she walked toward the bus stop. The city was already alive. Delivery vans honking, people shouting into phones, someone playing a saxophone near the corner. At the bus stop, her reflection flickered in the glass. She looked tired, too young to look that tired. She touched the bruise on her wrist and tucked her hands into her pockets. Her phone buzzed. A new message. She hesitated before checking it. "Tyler, you looked scared last night. Cute." Her stomach turned. He had been watching. Grace deleted the message immediately and turned the phone off. Her hands trembled as she boarded the bus. The ride downtown took 40 minutes. When she stepped off, she realized the stop was right across from a skyscraper of mirrored glass. The morning sun hit it so hard that she had to squint to read the name printed near the top. Harrington Global. Her breath caught. She looked down at the folded coat in her arms, then up at the name again. It could not be, but it was. She laughed nervously under her breath. "Just my luck," she murmured. Inside the restaurant, the air smelled of coffee and bleach. The manager, a woman in her 50s with a sharp voice, handed Grace a small name tag. "Smile more," she said flatly. "The customers here are high-end. Some of them even work for the Harrington Group across the street." Grace nodded, trying to hide her unease. She hung her coat in the back room and began her first shift, taking orders, refilling coffee, pretending the world was normal again. Hours later, during a short break, she stepped outside the staff door for a breath of cold air. She took out her notebook, tracing the folded edge where she had hidden the black card last night. It was still there. The number gleamed faintly in the daylight. She thought of calling it just once to say thank you or to return the coat properly. Then her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. Photo attached. A blurry picture of her standing at that very door, holding her notebook. Text. "Told you, Grace. I always know where you are." The phone slipped from her fingers. Her heart hammered as she looked around the empty alley, half expecting to see Tyler in the crowd. But there was only the sound of traffic and the distant echo of sirens. She pressed her hand to her chest, whispering to herself, "Not again. Please, not again." And for the first time since that night, she wished she had never thrown away that black card at all. Grace's hands were still shaking long after her break ended. The image of that message, her own photo taken without her knowing, haunted her through every table she cleaned and every smile she forced. By the time her shift ended, she felt like her nerves were splintered glass. Outside, the sky had turned a deep orange. She clutched the worn coat tighter around her as she walked down the street, her steps echoing between tall buildings. The coat had become her shield, a strange comfort that reminded her of safety, or maybe of the illusion of it. At a crosswalk, she lifted her eyes and froze. The glass tower she had noticed that morning loomed ahead again. Harrington Global gleamed across its facade in bright silver letters. She had walked right back to it without realizing. The evening wind whipped her hair across her face. She stared up at the building for a long time. It was impossible to ignore now. That name was stitched into the coat she was wearing, printed across the skyline, and somehow stitched into her thoughts since that night. Grace crossed the street. The closer she got, the more the reflection of the city melted into the building's glass. The revolving doors spun quietly as employees in suits hurried out. She stopped in front of them, trying to gather enough courage to step inside. Her mind argued with itself. She should just drop the coat at the front desk, leave a note, and walk away. She should not involve herself with someone like him. Men like Cole Harrington belonged to a different world, the kind of world that made promises with contracts and ended lives with silence. And yet, part of her wanted to see his face again, to thank him properly, to believe that maybe not every powerful man used that power to harm. Before she could decide, her phone vibrated again. Her heart jumped. She almost did not want to look, but the name flashing on the screen made her blood run cold. Tyler. The message read, "You think hiding behind that building will save you?" She spun around, scanning the sidewalk, but no one was there. Only the rush of evening commuters and a delivery truck pulling away. The air suddenly felt thinner. She gripped the phone, her breath trembling. She needed help, but who could she call? The police had dismissed her before. Friends? She had lost them one by one during her relationship with Tyler. The thought of calling that number on the black card flashed through her mind again. Grace stepped back into the shadow of the building, pulled out her notebook, and unfolded the card. The silver letters caught the city lights. Cole Harrington. One number. No title, no promise. Just call when ready. She hesitated for what felt like forever. Then, she pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. Then a calm voice answered, low and clear. "Grace." She froze. How do you know my name?" "I had your file checked after the incident. You called sooner than I expected." His tone was even, without surprise or warmth. "Are you safe right now?" She looked over her shoulder at the empty street. "I do not know." "Stay where you are," he said simply. "I will send someone to get you." Before she could protest, the line went dead. 10 minutes later, a black car pulled to the curb. The driver, dressed in a dark suit, stepped out and opened the rear door. "Miss Miller?" Grace hesitated. She remembered her own rule, do not get in his car. But fear pressed heavier than pride. She climbed in. The city lights slid by outside as they drove. Her reflection caught faintly in the tinted glass. The silence inside the car was suffocating until the driver spoke quietly. "Mr. Harrington is waiting for you." When the car stopped, she looked up to see they were parked at a private entrance behind the same building. The driver guided her to an elevator, pressed the top button, and stepped back as the doors closed. Her pulse raced as the numbers climbed 21, 22, 23. Then the doors opened to a wide office glowing with soft light. Cole stood near a wall of windows, his back to her, looking out over the city. He turned as she stepped in. He looked exactly as he had that night, precise, unshaken, like a man who could stop storms just by choosing not to move. "Why am I here?" she asked quietly. "Because you are being followed," he replied. "Tyler Reed has ties to a man I have been investigating for months. I need to know everything he has done to you." Quote. Grace's throat tightened. "I did not come here for an interrogation. I came to return your coat." She laid it carefully on the chair. "Thank you for helping me, but I do not want to owe you anything." Cole studied her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he said, "You do not owe me, but you deserve protection." "Protection?" she echoed. "From who?" "From my past." He nodded once. "Sometimes the past fights harder than the future. I can stop him, but I need your cooperation." "Go." Grace took a step back, shaking her head. "I cannot. I just want to live quietly. I do not want to be dragged into whatever this is." Cole's expression softened, just a fraction. "You think I do this because I need you?" he said quietly. "I do it because men like him do not stop unless someone makes them." For a moment, neither spoke. The city below glowed in silence, 1,000 stories flickering in windows. Finally, Grace whispered, "What happens if I say no?" Cole walked to his desk, picked up a small envelope and handed it to her. "Then you walk away. This contains my lawyer's contact and a new phone number, should you ever change your mind." Grace took the envelope with trembling fingers. She wanted to leave, but part of her could not move. Something about his calm presence steadied the chaos inside her. When she finally found her voice, it was softer. "Why me, Mr. Harrington?" He looked at her for a long time, his voice quiet when he finally answered. "Because that night, when I saw you fight back even when you were terrified, I realized something. You are not just another victim, Grace. You are evidence that courage still exists in a world that has forgotten what it looks like." She stared at him, unsure what to say. "Go home," he said gently. "Sleep. Tomorrow will be worse if you do not rest." Quote. As she stepped into the elevator, the city lights reflected in her eyes. She held the envelope close to her chest, her thoughts a storm of fear and something she could not name. Down below, the night waited darker, quieter, but far from over. The next day felt heavier than the last. Grace had barely slept. Every sound outside her apartment made her tense. Every passing car made her heart race. She had placed Cole's envelope on her nightstand, but she had not opened it. It felt like a line she was not ready to cross. By late afternoon, she forced herself to work. The restaurant was crowded, noisy, a place where she could hide behind trays and fake smiles. For a few hours, she almost forgot the world outside until Tyler walked through the door. He looked polished, calm, a mask of charm on his face. His eyes found her instantly. "There you are," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "You left your phone on last night." Quote. Grace froze, tray trembling in her hands. Her manager hurried over, recognizing Tyler as a regular. "Mr. Reed, welcome back," the woman said, smiling nervously. Tyler smirked at Grace. "We had a little misunderstanding," he told the manager. "I just wanted to make sure she's doing all right." Grace whispered, "Leave me alone." But the manager frowned at her tone. "Grace, if there is a problem, you can take your break." Tyler leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You would not want to lose another job, would you?" The fear crept back before she could stop it. Her hands clenched at her sides. "Please go," she said quietly. Instead, he raised his voice, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "This girl has a temper, you know that? Maybe not suited for service work." The manager's expression turned sour. "Grace, we do not need drama here." Tyler smiled in victory. He reached into his wallet, dropped a few bills on the counter and whispered, "Told you, no one keeps you if I say no." Then he walked out, leaving the door swinging behind him. The manager sighed. "You can collect your pay at the end of the week, but I think it is better if you do not come back." It took Grace a moment to understand. She was being fired again. Outside, the city was gray and wet. She stood under the awning, holding her bag, her apron still tied around her waist. People hurried by, umbrellas bobbing like moving shadows. Her body felt hollow. She did not cry. She just stood there, the drizzle soaking into her hair. Then she heard the soft roll of tires. A black SUV stopped beside the curb. The window slid down, and she saw him, Cole Harrington. He sat in the driver's seat this time. No driver, no assistant, only him. The look in his eyes was the same as that night, cold, calm, but something sharper underneath. "Get in," he said. Grace took a step back. "No, I told you, I do not want your help." Cole's gaze stayed on her, steady and unreadable. "You were followed here. Tyler is not acting alone. He is connected to a man who has been moving money through my restaurants for months. You are in the middle of it, whether you like it or not." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" He opened the passenger door. "Get in. It is not a request." She hesitated, her pride screaming to walk away. But the street around her felt too exposed, and she remembered the message from Tyler, "I always know where you are." She climbed in, sitting rigidly in the passenger seat. The SUV moved smoothly through traffic, its windows tinted dark. Grace stared out at the city lights flashing past, trying to steady her breathing. Cole did not speak for several minutes. Then he said quietly, "You keep thinking this is about you owing me. It is not. It is about keeping you alive." She turned to him. "Why do you even care?" He glanced at her briefly. "Because I do not like watching innocent people get destroyed for someone else's gain." The silence stretched between them until the car turned into an underground garage. The heavy metal gate slid open, revealing a private elevator. Cole parked, stepped out, and waited for her to follow. The elevator doors opened into the top floor of his building, sleek, silent, and too bright. Grace wrapped her arms around herself as she stepped out. Cole walked ahead, his voice even. "You can stay here tonight. The guest room has security access. No one will find you." Grace frowned. "You expect me to just trust you?" He stopped and turned. "No, I expect you to use logic. Right now, you have nowhere else safe to go." His words cut cleanly, but they were true. She hated that they were true. She nodded slowly. "One night, that is all." He gave a faint nod. "One night," quote, a woman in a housekeeper's uniform appeared, leading Grace to a quiet suite at the end of the hall. Before following, Grace glanced back. Cole stood near the glass wall, looking out at the rain, his reflection divided by streaks of light. For the first time, she noticed the faint exhaustion behind his composure, the kind that comes from years of carrying something alone. When she entered the guest room, she found a folded towel, a glass of water, and a small card on the bedside table. It read simply, "You are safe tonight." Grace sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the words until her eyes blurred. Safe. She had forgotten what that word felt like. Outside, the storm thickened. Somewhere beyond the glass, Cole Harrington stood watching the city he owned and the woman who had just stepped, unknowingly, into the center of his secret war. When morning came, the storm had passed, but the world outside the glass walls was still gray. Grace woke to the soft hum of the city below, wrapped in a blanket that felt far too comfortable for her to belong in. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was until the scent of coffee drifted through the air. She stepped out of the guest room cautiously. The floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with pale light. Cole Harrington stood near the table, already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, reading something on a tablet. His posture was as precise as ever controlled, unreadable. "You did not have to stay," he said without looking up, "but I am glad you did." Grace crossed her arms. "You said one night." "I know." He finally met her eyes. "And now I need to explain why I brought you here." He motioned to the seat across from him. She hesitated, then sat. A silent housekeeper placed a cup of coffee in front of her before quietly leaving the room. Cole placed the tablet down and spoke in his calm, deliberate tone. "Tyler Reed is not just a man with a temper. He has been taking money from a company that launders funds through small restaurants and bars, some of which I own. He uses women like you as cover. He signs leases, collects payments under their names, and when the investigation starts, he disappears. The debt stays on them." Grace blinked, the words sinking in like stones. "So I am one of his covers." "Yes," Cole said, "and now the authorities believe you are part of the scheme." Her heart dropped. "What? That is impossible. I did not even know—" "I know you did not," he interrupted gently. "But proving it requires your testimony. I have lawyers who can clear your name, but they need you to speak on record." Grace shook her head slowly. "You want me to stand in court and tell strangers everything that happened to me?" "I want you to tell the truth," Cole replied. "The only way to destroy men like him is to make them face it publicly." She stared at the steam rising from her coffee. The idea of reliving all of it, every manipulation, every bruise, every humiliation, made her stomach twist. "You are asking for something I cannot give." He studied her quietly, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a slim folder. Inside were photographs, names, and reports. "He is not the first. There are 3 other women before you, all silenced, all ruined financially. You could be the first who stops him." Grace looked down at the photos, faces blurred, but the stories were clear. Broken leases, unpaid debts, restraining orders ignored. The folder trembled in her hands. Cole's voice softened, lower than she had ever heard it. "I am not here to save you, Grace. I am giving you a chance to save yourself." She looked up sharply. "That is easy for you to say. You are a man with lawyers and bodyguards and power. You lose nothing by telling the truth." His jaw tightened. "You are wrong." He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a headline from years ago, an article about a corporate scandal that had nearly destroyed Harrington Global. Below it, a smaller photo showed a woman, smiling beside him. The caption read, "Amelia Harrington, wife of CEO Cole Harrington, dies in car crash amid insider trading accusations." Grace blinked, unsure what to say. "Your wife?" He nodded once. "She took the blame for something she did not do. I stayed silent because my lawyers told me it was better for the company. That silence killed her. Since then, I have made a rule never again." For the first time, his mask cracked. She saw the faint exhaustion behind his calm, the kind of pain that came from guilt carried too long. Grace lowered her eyes. "So this is about redemption for you?" "This is about justice," Cole said firmly. "For her, for you, for anyone who never got to speak." The room fell quiet except for the sound of the city far below. Grace ran her fingers along the edge of the folder. Every part of her wanted to disappear, but deep down she knew hiding had never saved her before. Finally, she whispered, "If I do this, if I testify, what happens after?" Cole's gaze softened. "After? You walk out of that courtroom free. You get your name back. And you never owe me or anyone again." Grace closed the folder slowly, her reflection mirrored in the glossy surface. "I need time to think," he nodded. "Take all the time you need. But remember, silence protects him, not you." Quote. She stood, her voice steady but her eyes full of storm. "You saved me once, Mr. Harrington. Do not think that gives you the right to ask for my soul." Cole's tone stayed calm, but there was a flicker of something deeper. "I am not asking for your soul, Grace. I am asking for your courage." She turned away, clutching the folder to her chest. Outside the glass walls, sunlight began to break through the clouds, casting faint light across the floor. As she stepped into the elevator, she whispered to herself, "Courage does not pay the rent. Courage does not erase scars." But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice answered back, "Maybe it frees you instead." That night, Grace sat alone in her small apartment, the folder Cole had given her resting on the table like a loaded weapon. Every few minutes she opened it, read a line, and closed it again. The faces of the other women blurred together in her mind, their pain overlapping with her own. She could still hear Cole's voice, calm, unwavering, "Silence protects him, not you." But courage was not something she could summon on command. It was something she had buried deep, under years of fear and shame. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent. Somewhere below her window, a siren wailed and faded into the night. Grace leaned back in her chair, pressing her palms over her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that speaking up would free her. But every memory of Tyler's anger came rushing back, the shouting, the threats, the way he always made her feel small. Her phone buzzed. For a moment she thought it was another message from him, but when she looked, it was an unknown number with a video link. She hesitated before pressing play. The screen lit up with a dimly lit room. A woman's voice, shaky but steady, spoke directly into the camera. "My name does not matter. What matters is that I stayed silent for too long. I thought silence kept me safe, but it only kept him free. If you are watching this, please do not make my mistake." At the end of the video, a line of text appeared, shared with permission by Harrington Global Advocacy Project. Grace stared at the screen, realizing Cole had sent it. There were no demands this time, no instructions, only a choice. She turned the phone face down and looked around the room. Everything she owned could fit into 2 suitcases. The refrigerator hummed faintly in the corner. The air smelled faintly of detergent from the laundry she had just folded. Her whole life was small, fragile, and temporary. She stood, walked to the mirror, and looked at her reflection. The bruises had faded, but the look in her eyes had not changed. She whispered to the woman staring back, "No more debts to any man." The words sounded empty now. She could feel it. What if, this time, trusting someone was not a debt, but a way to heal? Her gaze shifted to the coat, draped over the back of a chair, Cole's coat, still carrying the faint scent of cedar. She touched the fabric, tracing the stitched name inside. "C. Harrington," she whispered, almost to herself. Maybe I was meant to cross his path. But doubt crept in again. Maybe she was just another name in a file. Maybe he only cared because she fit into his plans. She shook her head hard, trying to quiet the noise in her mind. Grace finally picked up her phone. She typed a message to the number Cole had used. Her thumb hovered over the screen. "I am not ready to testify. I just want to give your coat back." She deleted the words, replaced them with, "Thank you for the video." Then she pressed send. Almost instantly, a reply came. "You do not owe me an answer, Grace. You only owe yourself the truth." Her chest tightened. For the first time in a long while, she felt something other than fear, something like clarity. She picked up her notebook, the one filled with her survival rules, and flipped to the first page. Slowly, she crossed out every line. At the bottom, she wrote a new one. "I will not let fear decide who I am." As she set down the pen, rain began to fall against the window, soft and steady. The sound filled the silence around her like a heartbeat. Grace looked out at the city lights shimmering through the rain. Somewhere out there, Cole was still awake, fighting his own ghosts in a glass tower. And for the first time, she no longer felt completely alone. The rain had not stopped by midnight. It drummed against the window of Grace's apartment in steady rhythm. She sat on the couch, half asleep, when a loud knock jolted her upright. Her heart jumped. 3 more knocks, harder this time. She froze, listening. No one ever visited her at this hour. Slowly, she stood and moved toward the door. "Who is it?" she called out. No answer, only silence. Her hand trembled as she reached for the lock, but before she could turn it, the door burst open. Tyler stumbled inside, drenched, his eyes glassy with alcohol and anger. "You thought you could hide from me?" he shouted, slamming the door shut behind him. Grace backed away, her voice shaking. "Get out. I am calling the police." Quote. He laughed, waving a phone in her face. "Go ahead. You think they will believe you? You think your new rich friend will protect you?" Her blood ran cold. He knew about Cole. "How do you even know his name?" she whispered. Tyler smirked. "You forget who taught you how to pick men. Harrington has enemies, and I talked to them. They told me everything. You are just another pawn to him, Grace." He stepped closer, grabbing her arm. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "You made me look weak," he hissed. "You think you can humiliate me and walk away?" Grace's eyes darted to the corner of the room. A faint red light blinked above the doorway, a small security camera the landlord had installed after several break-ins. Relief flooded her chest. Maybe, for once, someone would see what was happening. Tyler followed her gaze and snarled. "Oh, you think that little camera will save you?" He yanked her closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Say one more word, and I will make sure he loses everything." Her mind raced. He was too close, his grip too strong. She tried to twist away, but his hand came down hard, pushing her backward into the table. Pain shot through her shoulder as she fell. Then the door flew open again. 2 security officers rushed in, followed by Cole. He was soaked from the rain, his expression like stone. "Let her go," he said. Tyler froze, startled. "You have no right to be here." Quote. Cole stepped forward, voice low and cold. "You broke into her home. That gives me every right." The officers moved quickly, restraining Tyler before he could react. Grace sat on the floor, shaking, clutching her bruised arm. Cole crouched beside her, his tone shifting from command to concern. "You are safe now. I am sorry it took this long." She looked at him through tears. "You knew he would come, did you not?" He nodded slightly. "We have been tracking him. He contacted one of my competitors earlier tonight. I could not risk being too late." The police arrived moments later. As they led Tyler away in handcuffs, he shouted over his shoulder, "You think this changes anything? You are still his charity case." Cole did not answer. He only stood silently until the hallway emptied. Grace wiped her tears, her voice raw. "If I testify, this will all go public, will it not?" "Yes," Cole said. "But it will end it, too." She took a deep breath. For the first time, the fear in her eyes began to fade. "Then I will do it," she said quietly. "I will speak." Cole nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible smile in his eyes. "Good. Do it for you, not for me." She looked around her ruined apartment, broken glass, overturned furniture, the smell of rain and adrenaline in the air. And then, for the first time in years, she felt something she had not felt since her mother's funeral. Control. Grace straightened, clutching the coat draped over a chair. "Let us end this," she whispered. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that when she walked into that courtroom, she would not be walking alone. The days that followed were a blur of statements, paperwork, and long meetings in rooms that smelled of coffee and ink. Grace found herself sitting across from lawyers and investigators, telling parts of her story she had never said out loud before. Each word felt like sandpaper against her throat, but with every sentence, she felt something inside her begin to loosen the weight of silence, finally cracking open. Cole was always there, though he kept his distance. He never interrupted, never spoke for her. When she stumbled over a memory, he waited. When she needed a break, he nodded, and quietly stepped out of the room. He was present, but never overpowering, and that steadiness anchored her more than she expected. One afternoon, she stood by the window of his office, watching the city hum below. She looked smaller against the skyline, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "You really think one person speaking up can change all this?" Cole turned from his desk. "Change does not start with power. It starts with one person deciding they have had enough." Grace smiled faintly. "You sound like you have rehearsed that." He looked down, his tone quiet. "Maybe because I have been saying it to myself for years." Later that week, Cole invited her to sit in on a meeting at Harrington Global. It was a room full of executives, all suits and careful words. They were drafting a new company policy on workplace safety and harassment prevention, when an older director laughed off a suggestion saying, "People are too sensitive these days." Grace's pulse quickened. The old fear stirred the instinct to stay silent. But then she remembered Tyler's voice, the look on his face the night he broke in. She raised her hand. "With respect, sir, sensitivity is not the problem. Silence is." The room went quiet. Every head turned toward her. She felt her voice shaking but did not stop. "You do not lose money by protecting people. You lose your soul by ignoring them." No one spoke for a moment. Then Cole's voice broke the silence. "Well said," he told the room. "Add her suggestion to the new policy draft." Quote, when the meeting ended, Grace lingered near the doorway. Cole approached, his expression unreadable but softer than usual. "That was brave," he said. She exhaled. It did not feel brave. It just felt right. "That is what real courage feels like," he said. "Never loud, just right." That evening they stood together on the rooftop terrace as the sun sank behind the skyline. The city looked golden, almost peaceful. Cole handed her a folder, her official witness statement, signed and sealed. "This goes to the court tomorrow," he said. Grace held it carefully, realizing the truth of what he had given her. It was not just a case file, it was her voice, restored. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me before I even believed myself." Cole looked out over the horizon. "You did the hard part, Grace. I just made sure the world was listening." Quote, as the wind lifted her hair, she realized something she had not before. Redemption was not a gift someone gave you. It was something you chose, and today, she had chosen it. The courthouse was colder than Grace expected. The walls were pale, the benches stiff, and every sound seemed to echo. She sat quietly, hands clasped in her lap, the signed statement resting in her bag. Outside, reporters were already gathering, cameras flashing for a story that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with spectacle. Cole sat a few rows behind her, calm and still. He had promised not to interfere, not to speak unless necessary. He kept that promise. His presence was steady but distant, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. When her name was called, Grace stood. Her knees trembled, but her steps were sure. She took the stand, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Her voice cracked on the first few words, but she did not stop. She told them everything, the fear, the manipulation, the debt, and the silence. The defense attorney tried to twist her words, suggesting she had exaggerated, that maybe she had misunderstood Tyler's intentions. Grace lifted her chin. "I misunderstood once," she said firmly. "I thought love meant surrender. I will not make that mistake again." Quote, the courtroom fell silent. Every sound disappeared until all that remained was the echo of her words. When she stepped down, Cole's gaze met hers across the room. No nod, no smile, just quiet respect. A week later, the verdict came. Tyler was found guilty of assault and fraud. The news spread quickly. For the first time in years, Grace's name appeared in headlines not as a victim, but as a survivor. At the press conference that followed, Cole stood before microphones, announcing a new foundation, the I Deserve Help Fund, dedicated to supporting survivors of financial and emotional abuse. Reporters asked him why he started it. He answered simply, "Because no one should need a millionaire to be believed." Grace watched from the back of the room, wearing her own clothes, her own calm. She was no longer hiding in anyone's shadow. When the cameras turned away, she walked outside, the winter air cool against her face. Cole was waiting near the steps. The crowd around them blurred into the background. "I told you this would end," he said quietly. Grace smiled faintly. "It did not end, Cole. It just began." He studied her for a moment. "What happens now?" She reached into her bag and handed him his coat, the same one from that night. "This belongs to you," she said. He shook his head. "Keep it. You earned it." Quote. Grace smiled, folding the coat over her arm. "No, I do not need it anymore. I finally have my own warmth." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she turned to leave, the crowd parting around her as sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. Her voice, soft but certain, lingered in the air. "I thought he saved me that night, but the truth is, I saved myself by choosing to be heard. You?" And somewhere behind her, Cole Harrington smiled, knowing that for both of them, rescue had finally become redemption.